The cabin owner looked at us for 3 seconds before saying the sentence that should have made us turn around. "I'm really sorry." He scratched the back of his neck and glanced at the keys in his hand. "There's been a mistake." My best friend, Chloe Morgan, slowly turned toward me. I already knew that look. It was the look she gave me right before life became my problem. "What kind of mistake?" she asked. The owner cleared his throat. "The cabin you booked had a pipe burst this morning." Chloe blinked. And I moved you to another cabin." "Okay." He hesitated. "But it's smaller." I folded my arms. "How much smaller?" He looked at both of us. "One room." Chloe's eyebrows rose. The owner quickly added, "It's very cozy." I had learned over the years that when strangers describe something as cozy, they usually meant inconvenient. "How many beds?" Chloe asked. The owner looked down at the keys, then back at us. "One." For a moment, the only sound was the wind pushing snow across the porch behind us. Chloe didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. The owner tried to smile. "It's a queen," as if that somehow solved the problem. "My name is Miles Turner." I was 29 years old, an architectural designer from Seattle, and until that weekend, I had built my entire friendship with Chloe around one simple rule. Never cross the line. Never say too much. Never look at her for too long. Never let my hand rest too close to hers. Because Chloe wasn't just beautiful. Beautiful was easy to survive. Chloe was worse than beautiful. She knew me. She knew when I was lying. She knew when I was tired. She knew when I was pretending to be fine. She knew every weak spot I had spent years covering with jokes and silence. And now we were standing in a mountain lodge during a snowstorm, being told we had one cabin, one bed, and nowhere else to go. I should have said no. I should have asked for a refund. I should have turned to Chloe and said, "This is a terrible idea." Instead, Chloe looked at me and said, "We're adults." I looked back at her. "That has never stopped us from making bad decisions." She smiled. "Exactly." The cabin owner handed me the key. "One more thing." Of course, there was one more thing. "The heater has been acting up." Chloe stared at him. "The heater. It works." He paused. "Mostly." I looked at the snow falling harder behind him. "Mostly." He lifted both hands. "There's a fireplace." Chloe gave a small laugh. Not because it was funny, because if she didn't laugh, she would probably start yelling. 20 minutes later, we were walking up the icy path toward a tiny wooden cabin with snow piled against the windows. Chloe carried one bag. I carried 3. She glanced at me. "Stop doing the heroic thing. I'm carrying luggage." "You know exactly what I mean." I did. That was the problem. I opened the cabin door. Warm air brushed our faces. For about 5 seconds, I thought maybe everything would be fine. Then we stepped inside. One bed. One fireplace. One couch so small it looked like it had been built for decorative squirrels. And one old wall heater rattling like it was already thinking about giving up. Chloe walked to the middle of the room, looked at the bed, looked at me, then sighed. "Well, this is going to be a very educational weekend." Chloe dropped her backpack beside the fireplace and slowly turned in a circle. "I've seen prison cells with better furniture." I set the grocery bags on the tiny kitchen counter. "You're being dramatic." She pointed toward the couch. "Miles." I looked. It wasn't really a couch. It was somewhere between a love seat and an expensive mistake. "I'm pretty sure my feet would touch the floor." "They absolutely would." I shrugged. "I'll sleep there." She crossed her arms immediately. "There it is." "What?" "The noble act. I'm 6 feet tall. And you're 5'4". So the bed makes more sense for you." She walked closer until she was standing only a few feet away. "You always do this." "Do what?" "You decide what's fair before asking me what I think." I looked away. It was an old habit. One I developed long before Chloe met me. After my engagement ended 3 years earlier, I stopped expecting people to choose me. It became easier to volunteer for discomfort before anyone could ask. Smaller piece of cake. Longer drive. Colder room. Shorter blanket. The couch. Felt safer somehow. Chloe knew it. She always knew it. She sighed. "Miles." "What?" "I'm not letting you destroy your spine to prove you're a gentleman." I smiled faintly. It's a very comfortable decorative squirrel couch. She laughed. I hate how funny you are. You don't. No. She smiled. I really don't. For a second, neither of us spoke. Outside, snow hit the windows harder. The cabin suddenly felt much smaller, almost like it wanted us to stop pretending there were 1,000 miles between us. Instead of 3 feet, Chloe clapped her hands once. Food. Excellent change of subject. I know. We unpacked groceries together. Pasta, soup, bread, marshmallows, coffee. Far too many snacks for 2 people. Why did you buy 3 bags of chips? I shrugged. I panic in grocery stores. You panic. What if future Miles wanted barbecue chips? She laughed again. There he is. Who? The real you. What was I before? The emotionally constipated version. I don't think that's a medical diagnosis. It should be. Dinner came together surprisingly well. The tiny kitchen forced us to move around each other constantly. Every few seconds, a shoulder brushed another. A hand reached for the same spoon. One of us stepped aside, then apologized, then laughed for apologizing. At one point Chloe reached across me for the salt. Her hair brushed my cheek. Vanilla. She still used the same shampoo she'd been using since college. I remembered because one rainy afternoon 7 years ago, she'd borrowed my hoodie after getting soaked walking across campus. When she gave it back 2 weeks later, it still smelled like vanilla. I'd washed that hoodie 3 times before finally admitting to myself I wasn't trying to clean it. I was trying not to miss her. Miles? I blinked. You've been staring at the pepper. I was evaluating it. For structural integrity? Exactly. She narrowed her eyes. You were somewhere else. I wasn't. Liar. I smiled. Architect. Same thing. After dinner, we lit the fireplace. The flames slowly filled the room with warm orange light. Outside, the wind had become fierce. Snow covered almost everything beyond the windows. Chloe sat cross-legged on the rug. I sat beside her. Not too close. Not too far. Exactly the kind of careful distance I'd been keeping for 7 years. She noticed. Of course she noticed. You know, she said quietly, if someone took a picture of us, they'd think we were awkward. They'd think we were dating. I laughed. No, they would. We're sitting 6 inches apart. Exactly. She looked into the fire. People always think we're together. They've thought that for years. My mom still asks. My sister stopped asking. What does she do now? She just calls you my future wife to annoy me. Chloe's cheeks turned pink. What do you tell her? I stared at the fire. The truth. And what's that? That we're best friends. Silence. The fire cracked softly. Then Chloe asked, so why does that answer always sound like it disappoints you? The question settled between us like another log falling into the fire. So why does that answer always sound like it disappoints you? I looked at the flames instead of her. Because looking at Chloe Morgan while trying to lie had never gone well for me. It doesn't. She gave a quiet laugh. Miles. What? You blink 3 times whenever you're about to say something you don't mean. I do not. You just did. I rubbed a hand across my face. I hate that you know that. I know everything. That wasn't true. If she knew everything, she would have known why I never dated anyone seriously after my engagement ended. Why every man who flirted with her instantly became my least favorite person in the room. Why every birthday hug lasted 1 second longer in my memory than it had in real life. She couldn't know, because if she did, she would have walked away years ago. I'm just tired, I said. She watched me for another moment. Then, thankfully, she let it go. Come on. She stood and held out her hand. What? We're playing cards. I didn't know you brought cards. I always bring cards. Why? In case civilization collapses. I took her hand and let her pull me to my feet. Reasonable. It wasn't until our fingers separated that I realized how warm her hand had been. Warmer than mine. Warmer than the fire. We spent the next hour accusing each other of cheating in games neither of us was taking seriously. You looked at my cards. I absolutely did not. You smiled. I smile all the time. You smile differently when you're lying. You have too many observations. I'm a teacher. No. What? You're a professional investigator disguised as a teacher. She threw a playing card at me. It bounced off my shoulder. Cheater. Loser. Handsome loser. The word escaped her before she could stop it. We both froze. Her eyes widened. She looked down at the cards. I know what you meant. No, you don't. I really don't. Color rushed into her cheeks. She laughed awkwardly. I was trying to say, happy. You've never confused handsome with happy before. I know. She covered her face with both hands. Oh my gosh. I couldn't help smiling. For the first time all evening, she looked flustered. It was strangely adorable. She peeked at me through her fingers. You are never allowed to mention this again. I'll try. You won't. No, I won't. She pointed at me. Terrible best friend. The worst. Before either of us could say another word, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then everything went dark. The cabin fell silent. Only the fireplace continued burning. Outside, the wind howled against the walls. Chloe instinctively moved closer. Miles? I'm here. Another loud gust shook the windows. Then came a metallic clunk from the wall. The old heater rattled violently. Coughed again, and died. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. Then Chloe looked toward the heater. Please tell me that's normal. Almost as if answering her, the little digital thermostat went completely black. I walked over and pressed every button. Nothing. I opened the owner's welcome binder. Nothing helpful. I checked the breaker. Everything was on. I grabbed my coat. I'm going outside. She stood immediately. No. I need to check the propane. It's freezing. I'll be 2 minutes. She looked genuinely worried. Miles. I'll be right back. The cold hit me like a wall. Snow whipped across the porch. By the time I reached the propane tank, my hands were already numb. Everything looked connected. Nothing seemed broken. When I stepped back inside, snow covered my shoulders. Chloe hurried over without thinking. She brushed the snow off my jacket, off my hair, off my face. Only when she realized what she was doing did she stop. Her hand lingered against my cheek for the briefest second. Then she quickly pulled it away. You're freezing. So is the cabin. She looked at the dead heater, then back at me. Finally, she pulled a thick wool blanket from the couch and wrapped it around both of us. Neither of us said a word. For a long moment, the only sound in the cabin was the fire crackling behind us. Chloe looked down. We're sharing a blanket now. It appears that way. I feel like this is the part in every romance movie where someone makes everything weird. I wasn't planning on helping Hollywood tonight. She smiled. Good. Then another icy draft slipped through the room. She shivered so hard the blanket shook. Without thinking, I pulled it tighter around both of us. She didn't move away. Instead, she stepped even closer. Our shoulders touched, then our arms, then almost everything except our faces. I swallowed. This was dangerous. Not because of what might happen, because of what I wanted to happen. You know, Chloe said quietly, you're still doing it. Doing what? Keeping 6 inches between us while we're sharing one blanket. I wasn't aware I was measuring. You always measure. I laughed. Occupational hazard. No. She looked up at me. Emotional hazard. That one landed. Hard. She always found the sentence I couldn't argue with. I looked toward the fireplace. We should probably put another log on. Miles. What? Look at me. I hesitated. Then I did. Her eyes reflected the firelight. Warm. Honest. Dangerously close. Can I ask you something? You always do. She smiled faintly. Promise you'll answer honestly? I'll try. No jokes. I'll try. No escaping. I sighed. Okay. She took a slow breath. Why haven't you dated anyone? I wasn't expecting that. I have. She raised one eyebrow. Coffee isn't dating. I went to dinner. Twice. You counted. I notice things. I know. She waited. She didn't rescue me. Didn't change the subject. She simply waited for the truth. Finally, I guess. I looked down at the wooden floor. I stopped believing I was what anyone actually wanted. Her expression changed immediately. Not pity. something sadder. Miles, my engagement ended. I know. It wasn't just that. I shook my head. When someone spends years choosing you, and then one day, they don't, you start wondering if maybe they were right. She stared at me. Do you really believe that? I try not to. But yes. Outside, the wind slammed against the cabin. Inside, the silence somehow became louder. Then Chloe did something completely unexpected. She reached up and took my hand. Not by accident. Not because she was cold. She simply intertwined her fingers with mine. Slowly, carefully, like she wanted me to know it was a choice. I looked at our hands, then at her. She smiled sadly. I wish you could see yourself the way everyone else does. I don't. I know. She squeezed my hand. That's what breaks my heart. Before I could answer, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Neither of us moved. The screen lit up the dark room. A message preview appeared. Rachel, if he still doesn't tell you this weekend, promise me you'll finally let him go. Time stopped. I hadn't meant to read it. Couldn't have avoided it. The words were right there, bright against the dark room. Chloe saw my face, then slowly turned toward the phone. The color drained from hers. Oh, she whispered. Oh no. She closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them again, there was nowhere left to hide. I can explain. I shook my head. You don't have to. No, she said softly. I think I do. The fire cracked loudly. Neither of us looked away. I looked back at the fireplace. I wasn't trying to read it. I know. The screen was right there. She nodded once. I know. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, Chloe picked up her phone, locked the screen without reading the rest of the message, and placed it face down. Then she looked at me. You deserve the truth. I let out a slow breath. I've deserved it for a long time. She gave a tiny, sad smile. I've been in love with you for almost 3 years. The words should have felt impossible. Instead, they felt familiar, like hearing the ending to a story I'd already guessed. I never planned to tell you. She looked toward the window. Rachel kept saying I was wasting my life. She said if I came on this trip and nothing changed, I needed to stop hoping. My chest tightened. So this weekend was goodbye. Her voice almost disappeared. I wasn't planning to fall out of love. I was planning to stop waiting. The fire cracked softly beside us. I stared at her. 3 years. 3 years she'd been carrying something that heavy while smiling through birthdays, movie nights, road trips, coffee after work. Every normal moment suddenly looked different. I never knew. She laughed quietly. I know. You hid it well. I had to. Her eyes met mine. You were healing. You just survived the worst relationship of your life. I wasn't going to become another person asking something from you. That sentence hit harder than anything else she'd said, because it sounded exactly like something I would have done. She had been protecting me, while I thought I was protecting her. Funny how fear could make two people walk in circles for years. I rubbed the back of my neck. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I do. She shook her head gently. No. You don't owe me love because I finally admitted mine. I don't want pity. I don't want guilt. She smiled through nervous eyes. I'd rather lose this moment than wonder if you stayed because you felt responsible. I took one slow step toward her. Then another. She didn't move. I've been lying too. Her brows pulled together. What? Not to you. To myself. She frowned. Miles. I told myself I didn't love you. I told myself I was just grateful. I told myself I was scared after my engagement. I laughed once. The sound was almost painful. I built an entire life around explanations. She watched me carefully. But none of them explain why I compare every woman I meet to you. Silence. None of them explain why every road trip is better when you're in the passenger seat. Or why I remember the exact color of your dress from Caleb's wedding. Or why every time someone flirts with you. I stopped. She whispered, "What happens?" I hate him. She blinked. I don't even know him. And I already hate him. For one heartbeat, neither of us breathed. Then Chloe covered her mouth with one hand. You. She laughed through tears. You absolute idiot. I smiled. I've been called worse. For 3 years. I nodded. For almost 3. She stared at me in complete disbelief. I thought you didn't see me. I couldn't stop seeing you. I just thought. You deserved someone braver. Chloe closed the distance between us. Now only inches separated us. Miles. Yeah. She looked straight into my eyes. Do you know what the bravest thing you've done this weekend is? No. You finally stopped deciding what I deserve. Those words unraveled something inside me. Years of caution. Years of overthinking. Years of believing silence was somehow kinder than honesty. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, the cabin suddenly felt warmer. Not because the heater had come back. Because for the first time in years, neither of us was hiding anymore. Chloe's eyes never left mine. For years, I'd imagined what this moment might look like. A crowded restaurant. A rainy street. Maybe one of those ridiculous movie moments where everything suddenly made sense. Instead, it happened in a freezing cabin with a broken heater, a dying fire, and 2 people who had wasted years protecting each other from feelings they both shared. She smiled through nervous tears. So, we're really doing this? I laughed quietly. I think we already did. She took another tiny step. Now there was barely enough space between us for a single breath. I should warn you. About what? I've imagined this conversation 1,000 times. And, in none of those versions were you this calm. I don't feel calm. You look calm. I've spent 7 years practicing. She laughed. I knew it. Knew what? That under all those terrible jokes. You're just scared. I nodded. I've always been scared. Of me? No. Then what? I searched for the words. Losing the only person who ever felt like home. Her smile disappeared. Not because she was upset. Because something in that sentence reached her. She whispered, Miles. I would have stayed. I know. You never had to earn my friendship. I know. And you never had to deserve my love. That one nearly broke me. For years I'd believed love had to be earned. By being useful, reliable, patient, safe. Chloe reached up and gently rested her hand against my cheek. You've spent so much of your life trying not to be a burden, that you forgot people can simply choose you. My eyes closed for a second. No one had ever said anything like that to me. When I opened them again, she was still there, still looking at me, still waiting, not for an answer, for permission. I smiled. You know what I realized? What? I've been making one mistake for years. She tilted her head. I kept waiting for the perfect moment. And I think perfect moments are mostly accidents. Her lips curved into the smallest smile. I think you're right. Outside, a powerful gust slammed against the cabin. The lights flickered once, then went completely dark again. The only light left came from the fireplace. Orange, soft, almost unreal. Chloe looked around. Well, the universe certainly enjoys dramatic timing. It always has. She laughed. Then another icy draft swept through the room. She shivered again. Instinctively, I reached for the blanket lying across the chair and wrapped it around her shoulders. She caught my wrist before I could step back. There. I looked down. She had pulled the blanket open just enough for both of us. Miles. Her voice was barely louder than the fire. Stop being noble. My heart started pounding. She smiled. And hold me. For a moment, everything inside me wanted to overthink it. Ask another question. Find another reason to hesitate. Instead, I finally listened. I stepped beneath the blanket, slipped one arm carefully around her waist. She let out a slow breath and rested her forehead against my chest. There you are, she whispered. I've been here the whole time. No. She smiled against my sweater. You've finally arrived. I laughed softly. You're impossible. I've had 7 years to practice. We stood there without speaking. Her heartbeat slowly matched mine. The storm kept raging outside, but inside the cabin, everything finally became quiet. After a long silence, Chloe looked up at me. So, what happens now? I smiled. I honestly have no idea. She pretended to sigh dramatically. I finally fall in love with my best friend. And he's still making it up as he goes. I'm an architect. I make plans. Excellent. She poked my chest. Make one. I looked into her eyes. Breakfast together tomorrow. She smiled. Easy. Coffee every Saturday. I already like that. One hike every month. She nodded. What else? I hesitated. She noticed immediately. What? I took a slow breath. If this works. When this works. I don't ever want to go back to pretending we're just friends. Her eyes filled again. You really mean that? I've never meant anything more. She leaned closer. So, she whispered with a smile. Does this count as our first date? Or the longest slow burn in human history? I laughed. I'm voting for both. She smiled. Then gently rose onto her toes. She smiled. Then gently rose onto her toes. My heart hammered so loudly I was certain she could hear it. So? She whispered. So? I smiled. I think I've waited long enough. She closed the last inch between us. Our first kiss wasn't dramatic. There was no orchestra, no fireworks, no perfect movie soundtrack. Just the quiet crackle of a fireplace, the wind pushing snow against the windows, and the woman I'd loved for years finally kissing me like she'd stopped being afraid. She was careful, almost hesitant, like she was giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. My hand settled gently against her waist. She relaxed instantly. A tiny sigh escaped her lips, one I'd never heard before, one I knew I'd never forget. When we finally pulled apart, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other. Then Chloe laughed. What? I spent 3 years imagining our first kiss. And it wasn't anything like this. I smiled. Better. She nodded immediately. So much better. Before I could answer, the fire suddenly shrank. The last large log collapsed into glowing embers. The room grew noticeably colder. Chloe rubbed her arms. I think the cabin is trying to kill us. I looked toward the bedroom. We should probably use the actual bed before we freeze. She followed my eyes, then looked back at me. For the first time all weekend, she seemed nervous. So, we're really sharing a bed. I suppose we are. She smiled awkwardly. This feels significantly less innocent than it did this morning. I was thinking exactly the same thing. She walked toward the bedroom, stopped beside the bed, then turned around. Miles? Yeah. If you offer to sleep on the couch, I'm going to throw a pillow at your head. I laughed. The squirrel couch? Especially the squirrel couch. I raised both hands. I surrender. Good. She disappeared into the tiny bathroom to change. A few minutes later, she came back wearing soft gray pajama pants and my oversized hoodie, the same hoodie she'd stolen from me 6 months earlier after spilling hot chocolate on her sweater. She'd never returned it. Honestly, I'd never asked. She looked down at herself. What? You remembered. Remembered what? You left this at my apartment. I know. I figured you'd eventually ask for it back. I smiled. I was hoping you'd keep it. Her cheeks turned pink. You really are terrible at hiding your feelings. I've recently accepted that. She climbed under the heavy quilt, then looked at the empty space beside her. Are you coming? I swallowed. Yes. I turned off the last lamp. Only moonlight and the fireplace illuminated the room now. Carefully, I slid beneath the blanket, leaving what felt like a respectful mile between us. Chloe stared at the ceiling. Miles? That is the most polite 6 inches I've ever seen. I'm trying. I know. She rolled onto her side. But stop trying so hard. Without another word, she moved closer, until her forehead rested lightly against my shoulder. Every muscle in my body froze. She smiled. See, the world didn't end. No, it didn't. Her hand slowly found mine beneath the blanket. Our fingers intertwined naturally, like they'd been waiting years to do it. She looked up at me. You know what my favorite part of today was? The kiss. She smiled. That was a close second. I blinked. Second. My favorite part was the moment you finally stopped pushing me away. Those words stayed with me, because she was right. I hadn't been protecting Chloe. I'd been protecting myself. from disappointment, from rejection, from hope. She gently traced circles across the back of my hand with her thumb. Miles? Yeah. Promise me something. What? If either of us gets scared, we talk. No disappearing. No pretending. No deciding what's best for the other person. I smiled. Deal. She smiled back, then quietly whispered, I've wanted to fall asleep in your arms for a very long time. My chest tightened. I opened my arms. She moved into them without hesitation, resting her head over my heart. Outside, the snowstorm continued. Inside, for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of tomorrow. I don't know exactly when I fell asleep. Maybe it was sometime after the wind finally quieted. Maybe it was the steady rhythm of Chloe's breathing against my chest. Or maybe, for the first time in years, my mind simply stopped preparing for loss. When I opened my eyes, pale winter sunlight spilled through the curtains. The room was still cold, but not unbearably so. The fire had burned down to glowing embers. Chloe was still asleep. One hand rested over my heart. The other was tangled in the front of my hoodie. Her hair was a complete disaster. She looked nothing like the confident woman who argued with strangers over incorrect coffee orders or convinced third graders that finger painting was an acceptable life skill. She looked peaceful. I smiled without realizing it. You've been staring for at least 2 minutes. I blinked. I thought you were asleep. I was. You can do both? I'm talented. Her eyes slowly opened. Still sleepy. Still smiling. Good morning. Morning. She stretched carefully before looking up at me. So, we're still here. I noticed. And what? She studied my face. No panic. I shook my head. No regret. No. She searched my eyes for another second, then relaxed. Good. I brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. You thought I'd run? She smiled sheepishly. A little. I almost did. Her smile disappeared. What? Not because of you. Because I was scared. She nodded slowly. I know. I've spent years running whenever something mattered. She reached up and gently touched my cheek. Then thank you for staying. That simple sentence somehow meant more than all the dramatic confessions from the night before. We stayed in bed another 20 minutes, talking, laughing, pointing out ridiculous cracks in the wooden ceiling. Felt strangely normal, almost unfairly normal, like we'd skipped several awkward months and somehow landed in a version of life that had been waiting for us all along. Eventually, reality interrupted. My stomach growled loudly. Chloe burst into laughter. Well, that was romantic. I'm starving. I noticed. She climbed out of bed, immediately shivering. Nope. She grabbed the blanket and wrapped herself like an angry burrito. I officially missed central heating. I stood beside the old heater and pressed the power button one more time. Nothing. I sighed. It still hates us. It ships us. What? The heater. She nodded toward it. It saw 2 emotionally unavailable best friends. It knew what had to be done. I laughed. So this is all a conspiracy? Absolutely. The heater sacrificed itself. For love. I pointed at the dead thermostat. I'll write it a thank you letter. She smiled. I would. After breakfast. Or what could generously be called breakfast. Instant coffee and toasted bread. We decided to walk down to the frozen lake before the roads reopened. Snow reached almost to our knees. Chloe slipped twice in the first 5 minutes. Both times, she grabbed my hand. The third time, she didn't let go. You know, I said, I don't think you're actually that clumsy. She looked offended. Excuse me? I think you're looking for excuses. Excuses for what? To hold my hand. She pretended to think about it. Maybe. I laughed. Honest. I promised. The lake stretched before us like glass covered in snow. Completely silent. No cars. No voices. Just pine trees and white mountains. Chloe stood beside me, her shoulder touching mine. Beautiful. I nodded. It is. She smiled. I wasn't talking about the lake. I turned toward her. She was already looking at me. No hesitation. No jokes. Just quiet certainty. She reached into her coat pocket. I almost forgot. What? She pulled out a folded piece of paper. I wrote this yesterday. I frowned. When? Before we left home. She handed it to me. I thought, if nothing changed this weekend, I'd leave it in your truck after you dropped me off. I slowly unfolded the paper. At the top, in neat handwriting, it simply said, if you never feel the same. I looked up. She smiled softly. You don't have to read it. I carefully folded it again. No, I don't. Then I took the note and slipped it back into her pocket. I'd rather spend the rest of my life listening to you say those words instead. Tears immediately filled her eyes. She laughed through them. You're getting good at this. At what? Being brave. She stepped closer, wrapped both arms around my neck, and kissed me beneath the falling snow. By the time we walked back to the cabin, snow had collected on Chloe's beanie, my jacket, and somehow inside both of our boots. I can't feel my toes. You've said that 4 times. Because I still can't. You still have them. Barely. She bumped her shoulder against mine. Carry me. I laughed. You are perfectly capable of walking. I know. She smiled innocently. But I enjoy watching you argue before giving in. I haven't agreed. No. She held out both arms dramatically. You're about to. I sighed with exaggerated defeat. You are impossible. And I turned my back toward her. Get on. She gasped. I knew it. A second later she jumped onto my back, laughing as her arms slipped around my shoulders. You planned this. I absolutely planned this. She rested her chin lightly against my shoulder. You smell like firewood. You smell like vanilla. She went quiet. You remembered. I remember everything. She hugged me just a little tighter. For the rest of the walk, neither of us said another word. We didn't need to. When we reached the cabin, my phone finally found enough signal to vibrate. Once, twice, then 5 times in a row. I pulled it from my pocket. Ryan, are you two still alive? Emma, please tell me you didn't freeze to death. Noah, be honest. Are you sharing the bed? Chloe leaned over my shoulder. Oh no. What? They've started. I laughed. They've always suspected. They've done more than suspect. She pointed at another message. Ryan, if you two come back still claiming you're just friends, I'm starting a support group. I shook my head. They're never letting us live this down. They shouldn't. I looked at her. You don't mind. She smiled. For the first time. Not even a little. An hour later, the cabin owner finally answered my voicemail. I'm so sorry, he said. The repair truck can't make it until tomorrow morning. I looked at Chloe. She was pretending not to listen. No problem, I answered. We'll stay one more night. Her eyes met mine. She smiled. A real smile. The kind that reached every corner of her face. When I ended the call, she folded her arms. So, another night. It would appear so. She tilted her head. You don't sound disappointed. I'm not. She walked toward me slowly. Neither am I. That evening felt different. The nervousness was gone. Instead, everything felt strangely easy. We cooked dinner together. She stole pieces of pasta from the pan. I pretended not to notice. She sang along to an old playlist neither of us had heard since college. Terribly. Very, very terribly. You are painfully off-key. I teach children. They deserve better. They love it. They're legally trapped in your classroom. She threw a wooden spoon at me. Caught it. Bully. Professional bully. She laughed so hard she had to lean against the counter. Watching her, I realized something. For years, I'd been afraid that becoming a couple would somehow destroy our friendship. Instead, felt exactly the same. Only better. Because now, I didn't have to hide why she made me happy. After dinner, we sat in front of the fireplace again. Only this time, she didn't sit 6 inches away. She settled beside me naturally, tucked one leg beneath herself, and rested her head against my shoulder. Miles? Yeah. If we'd admitted this years ago, what do you think would have happened? I smiled. We would have argued over restaurant choices much sooner. She laughed. Probably. We would have traveled more. You would have stolen more of my hoodies. I already stole them. Fair point. She looked up at me. Anything else? I thought for a moment, then answered honestly. I think I would have been happier. She didn't say anything. She simply reached for my hand. Our fingers intertwined without thought, without hesitation, without fear. And for the first time in years, neither of us wondered what would happen if we crossed the line, because we already had, and neither of us wanted to go back. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the cabin windows. Only this time, warm air drifted from the heater. I stared at it, then looked at Chloe. It fixed itself. She narrowed her eyes. No. What? It waited. For what? She smiled. For us. I laughed. You still think the heater planned all this? I absolutely do. A knock sounded at the front door. I opened it to find an older repairman holding a toolbox. He glanced past me into the cabin, then toward Chloe, who was making coffee in my hoodie. He smiled knowingly. Looks like you two survived. We did. He crouched beside the heater. Funny thing. What? It only needed a new igniter. He replaced a small part, pressed one button. The heater hummed to life immediately. Less than 2 minutes. I looked at Chloe. She looked back at me. Then we both started laughing. The repairman frowned. What? Nothing, Chloe said. We're just realizing. This heater ruined 2 perfectly reasonable lives. He shrugged. Or fixed them. He packed his toolbox. Before leaving, he smiled at both of us. I've been fixing cabins up here for 30 years. Want some free advice? Sure, I answered. He pointed at Chloe. When life gives you the right person, don't waste time pretending you don't know. Then he walked outside. Neither of us spoke. Finally, Chloe whispered, I think I like him. I think he likes us. The drive home felt completely different from the drive up. 2 days earlier, there had been an invisible wall between us. Now, her hand rested comfortably in mine across the center console. Sometimes she'd look out the window. Sometimes she'd look at me. Every time I caught her smiling. What? She shook her head. I'm just getting used to this. So am I. She squeezed my hand. I like getting used to it. Halfway home, we stopped at the same little roadside cafe where we'd grabbed coffee before driving into the mountains. The waitress looked up. Oh, she smiled. You two came back. We did. She looked between us. Then at our joined hands. I knew it. I blinked. You knew what? She laughed. No one looks at their best friend the way you two looked at each other. Chloe burst into laughter. I told you people noticed. I groaned. Apparently everyone noticed. Except us, Chloe said softly. She was right. Sometimes, the whole world sees the truth before the two people living it. A week later, life returned to normal. Or at least, it tried to. Chloe went back to teaching. I went back to drafting building plans. But something had changed. Every evening ended with a phone call. Every Saturday started with coffee together. Every goodbye ended with a kiss instead of an awkward wave. Felt natural. Like we'd finally stopped pretending. About a month later, Chloe came over to my apartment carrying 2 grocery bags. What are those? Dinner. She walked into the kitchen like she'd lived there forever. I thought we were ordering pizza. We were. I changed my mind. Why? She smiled over her shoulder. Because I want this place to smell like home. I stood there watching her unpack vegetables, pasta, garlic, and a loaf of fresh bread. She caught me staring. What? Nothing. Miles. I just realized something. What? I used to think home was a place. She walked over and slipped her arms around my waist. And now, I kissed her forehead. Now I think, it's whoever waits for you when you get there. For a moment she didn't speak. Then she rested her head against my chest. You know. What? I'm really glad the heater broke. I smiled. So am I. 6 months later, the first snow of winter covered Seattle. Chloe stood beside my apartment window watching flakes drift past the glass. She turned toward me with that same smile I'd fallen in love with years before without admitting it. So, want to go back? To the cabin? She nodded. I hear the heater works perfectly now. I walked over, took both of her hands, and smiled. Then let's hope it breaks again. She laughed so hard she had tears in her eyes. Then she kissed me. Slowly. Happily. like someone who knew exactly where she belonged. Sometimes people spend years waiting for the perfect moment. The truth is, perfect moments rarely arrive on schedule. Sometimes they begin with a canceled trip, a broken heater, one bed, and someone brave enough to say, "Stop being noble and hold me."